verse 1 through 3. I'll have to take off my glasses. See what kind of love the Father has given to us, that we should be called children of God. And so we are. The reason why the world does not know us is that he does not know him. Beloved, we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet appeared, but we know that. When he appears, we shall be like him, because we shall see him as he is. And everyone who thus hopes in him purifies himself as he is pure. This is the word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God. Amen. And you may be seated. And if you would, please, once again, join me in prayer. Father, I thank you that your Spirit is dwelling here in our midst. And I ask that during this time that you would come and open our ears and soften our hearts. And I ask that you allow the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart to be pleasing and acceptable to your word, my rock and my redeemer. Amen? Amen. During the month of August, I have been talking about how God's holy love is with you from the moment that you were conceived in the womb until the moment that you go to the... Oh, good job. That means that you listen and that you've been here enough to know what I'm going to say. So thanks for being here. If this is your first time to visit with us, that's okay. You can watch our sermons online. If you want to fall asleep late at night, there's a good way to do that. God's grace and God's holy love are with you each and every nanosecond of your life. From the moment that you were conceived till the moment that you take your final breath, God was there with you. And there's nothing that you can do or no place that you can ever go that will escape God and his infinite love for you. That's part of the good news of who Christ is. In God's love and in God's grace, we saw in his prevenient grace how he woos you to him and he convicts you of his sin. In God's justifying grace, we saw how God closes the barrier through Jesus Christ and forgives us of our sin and frees us. And in God's sanctifying grace, we saw how God calls us to be holy both personally and socially so that we can get closer and closer to where God is. And today we'll learn about God's glorifying grace, the grace that brings us back together to God finally. In simplicity's sake, God's glorifying grace is simply the grace that enables each and every one of us to be conformed into the image of God so that we can dwell with him in the new creation. This is the final grace that God will bestow upon us, and it happens on that day when we pass from this world. Whether that's today or a decade from now or who knows, maybe a century now from me, right? I hope not. 137. That doesn't sound too great. We see this in Romans chapter 8, verse 30. Paul says, those who he predestined, he called, and those he called, he also justified, and those he justified, he will also glorify. See, Paul's telling us that one day, each and every single one of you will be glorified before God. You will be made as you should be. God is preparing each and every one of us for his eternal kingdom and his eternal reign. So in 1 John, when I just had Vince read this text for you this morning, John says some important things about this. I'm just going to read over a little bit of it again. He says, see what kind of love the Father has given to us that we should be called the children of God. So first, before I go any further, I just want to take a couple of asides. You are God's sons and daughters. Amen. We sometimes forget that. We take on the identities that the world tries to give us, right? You're worthless, you're no good, you're too skinny, whatever people tell you. And we put those identities on us. And what John is reminding us is that you are the sons and daughters of God. That's pretty amazing. The reason why the world doesn't know us is because they didn't know him. Then he says, beloved, we are God's children. And second, you need to remember sometimes that God loves you. I know you hear it, and hear it, and hear it. but God has made you worthy of his love, and he loves you just as you are. And he longs for you to know that love because, why? You're his kids. Parents, most of the time, love our kids, right? Most of you know what I'm saying. Most of the time. And God's love for us is more than my love for my kids. We are his kids, and he loves us. But he says, John continues and he says, we are God's children now, but what we will be has not yet appeared. But we know that when he appears, we shall be like him because we shall see him as he is. And everyone who thus hopes in him purifies himself as he is pure. So what John is telling us is that the way that we are right now, we're not going to be like that. And what God is going to do is he's going to come to us and he's going to purify us and he's going to change us in some sort of way after we die. John Wesley was a huge proponent, and so I can't do a series over Wesleyan's graces without talking a little bit about Wesley and some of his theology. After we die, before God's glorifying grace, when this happens, there will be a time in our life where, as Jesus says in Matthew chapter 25, we'll be judged. He'll separate us as the sheep are separated from the goats. And Wesley has an interesting theology, and I'm going to be honest, I'm not quite sure that as a pastor/nominal theologian that I agree with it, because John Wesley believed in what I call the Protestant purgatory. So, have you heard of purgatory? So you die, and some people think you instantly go to heaven or you instantly go to hell, and some people, like Wesley, believe this way, is that when you die, you go into a semi-waiting place. And the way I understand Wesleyan theology is that when the Christians or believers die, they go into like the good waiting area where things are nice. Have y'all been in a good waiting area? I'm just trying to know. And if you're not in Christ, you go to the bad waiting area. Well, you'll eventually be annihilated or cease to whatever happens. But the key is that one day we shall be judged. And that was one of the reasons that Wesley was so prone to preach holiness over and over and over again. Is he knew that God will look at our lives one day after we leave this planet and say, this is what you've done, be it good, bad, or indifferent. And I'm going to separate. And I'm going to judge. And that's kind of scary. But thanks be to the blood of Jesus Christ that will cover each and every one of us that are in him. And we are forgiven, so we don't have to be worried about the judgment that will be to come. And as John is saying, that after this happens, that what will happen is we will be changed. We will be transformed. The interesting thing to me about the stories of the resurrection in the New Testament is, think about, if you remember any of the stories, what happens? Mary, they all run to the tomb, right, and Jesus isn't there. And they leave, and Mary is left behind in most of the accounts. And Mary looks up, and who does she see? Oh, she doesn't think she sees Jesus, does she? No, she thinks she sees the gardener. Now, Mary had been with Jesus for at least 3 years of her life at this point. Ash and I have been married a little bit longer than that, but she doesn't leave me for 3 days and come back home and I'm like, who are you again? I remember what she looks like, right? Hopefully most of you remember your spouses. I'm not saying that Jesus and Mary were married, but anyway, that's a whole different... No, they weren't. But Mary looks at Jesus and she's starting to talk to him, and she's like, who are you? And she's like, he says, Mary, and as soon as Jesus says her name, it's like, it's Jesus. He had changed somewhat. He was the same yet different. And it's not just Mary. You look at Luke, at the story of the disciples on the road to Emmaus, what happens? These are disciples, people that have been taught by Jesus for at least 3 years. The same thing, they walk and talk with Jesus for mile after mile after mile, and finally Jesus reveals himself to them, and they're like, we've been talking to Jesus the whole time. It happens to the disciples. They're sitting around eating supper together. Jesus appears, and he at least gives them some warning this time. He says, hey guys, it's me. Look at my hands, feet, and side. And they're like, it's Jesus. Because they didn't realize that it was him. And poor Thomas, Thomas gets a poor rap. Thomas was the only one not eating supper with them, right? He was running late. He shows up late to the party, and everybody's already seen Jesus' hands and feet and side, and Thomas is like, well, I got to see him too. and now we say he's a doubter. But anyway, Jesus was changed after the resurrection. And what John is saying is that when we are glorified, that we ourselves will be made pure, that we ourselves will be changed. Paul says it like this in one of the greatest chapters on resurrection in the New Testament. It's in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, and I'm going to read verse 53 to you. For this perishable body must put on imperishability, and this mortal body must put on immortality. You see, so what happens for us to enter into God's eternal kingdom is God's grace has to come to us and transform us, because our bodies are mortal, right? Just this morning, I was hearing about people's knee pain and leg pain, and I can't see. And, like, I had some pain in my neck this week, and I went and saw a chiropractor for the first time ever in my life, and he was as crazy as I thought chiropractors would be. But my neck doesn't hurt anymore. So, like, I don't know what happened. And so what we're learning is that our bodies have to be transformed. And so God, after we die, transforms who we are and will be similar to as we are, but not quite yet the same. We will be made new. This is what His glorifying grace does, is it comes and it raises us from the dead and transforms us so that we are prepared for His eternal kingdom. A little bit earlier in 1 Corinthians 15, Paul says this. Now, if Christ is proclaimed as raised from the dead, how can some of you say there is no resurrection of the dead? Because if there's no resurrection from the dead, then not even Christ has been raised. And if Christ hasn't been raised, then our preaching is in vain and your faith is in vain. We are found to be misrepresenting God because we testify about the God that has raised Jesus Christ. And if He didn't raise Him, then that's not true, and the dead cannot be raised. Do you get Paul's rational thought here? It keeps a little confusing sometimes, but what Paul is saying is we are a people of the resurrection, right? And so if we believe that Jesus has been raised, then we believe that one day we too shall be raised. And if we don't believe that Jesus is raised, then, well, you can just go be like Mark through later or something. I don't know. We are a people of the resurrection because Christ is risen. Oh, see, this is a test for Easter. That's what we say every Easter, right? Christ is risen. And if we are a people of the resurrection, then Christ isn't just raised 1 week of the year. He is raised for all of eternity. And we ourselves will be resurrected. I'll be talking more specifically about the resurrection of the dead on October 13th, so come back on that Sunday. It'll be great. So I'm going to move on from resurrection because I don't want to spoil all of that sermon. So if we are transformed, if we are glorified, if we are raised, my logical question is, what are we raised to? The picture of modern heaven in most of our society is us sitting on a cloud playing harps, which I think I've told y'all before is more my version of hell. No offense to Harvest, but John tells us later in his last revelation, in Revelation chapter 21, this is his idea of the new heaven and the new earth. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be His people, and God Himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more, neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. And He who is seated on the throne said, Behold, I am making all things new. One of the other things that John Wesley believed that I follow in his footsteps with is the redemption of creation. See, I don't believe that God created all of the universe just so that one day humans and humans alone could go to heaven. But when God made the world in Genesis chapter 1, he said that it was good. When he made the heavens and the seas, he made it was good. When he made plants and animals, he said it was good. When he even made bananas, he said that they were good, right? And so it was all good, and sin entered the world, and we live in this place that is fallen and broken from him. And Revelation chapter 21 is painting a picture of this new heaven that is going to go back to the beginning. And so I truly believe that all of creation will be redeemed in some sort of way. Now, does that mean when we get to heaven that I will be able to ride a brontosaurus around? I don't know. I think that'd be pretty interesting though, right? What it does mean is that when these bodies pass from this world, that there won't be any more pain, or suffering, or anguish, or lament, or grief. And we'll be as we should have been to start off with. And God will welcome us into his kingdom. He'll transform us to how we should truly be. My goal in mind is that he'll look and say, well done, good and faithful servant. And we'll dwell with him eternally. Because this life is not, when we end this life, it is not the end of the story, but it is just of the one true story in which God is calling each and every one of us to. The story as it should have been. The story as it shall be forever. That's what we sang earlier, right? You remember that? Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be. Right? Every single week. As it was in the beginning, so it is and ever shall be. World without end. This is what God's glorifying grace does in each and every one of us in our lives. Is he comes to us and he transforms us so that we will be prepared for his eternal kingdom and his eternal glory. So whether you have grandkids or great-grandkids on the way in the womb, whether you've got one foot in the tomb, there is no way that you can escape God and his gracious, holy love for each and every one of you. And the reason that I believe that the graces are so important in our lives, and the reason that I think glorifying grace is specifically so important, is because one day, whether it's today or 100 years from now, we will cease to be on this earth, right?
Right.
And between now and then, what Christ calls us to is to have a life of peace and love and joy. And so if I can trust that he was there when I was conceived, and he was there when I was born, and he was there when I was called into ministry, and he's here with me now, that I can trust that one day when I leave this world, that he's going to be there still. And he's calling us to continually build our faith in him, so that one day when we're a little bit closer, and for each and every day between now and then, we can simply say, as one of my favorite hymns says, take my hand, precious Lord, and lead me home. We'll trust that his glorifying grace will lead us into his eternal kingdom. Let us pray. Father, I thank you so much for your immense holy love for each and every one of us, for your children, for your sons and daughters. I thank you that there's no place that we can go or nothing that we can do that will exceed your love for us. And so I just pray that you continue to draw us further and further into who you are. And I pray that you prepare each and every one of us for that day that we depart this world. And your grace is able to glorify us, to transform us, so we will be prepared for your eternal kingdom, where the world shall not end. We ask these things in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.